Today's story is our very first in the series. The Scarlet Cycle, women's menstruation in the Middle Ages. If you're new here, please subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments how you'd like the rest of our story to unfold. Now let us begin. Breathe in deeply, and let your shoulders soften. Imagine a gentle breeze fluttering through vine-clad timber frames. It is late summer, and the air carries the faintest scent of lavender and straw. In a small village nestled beside a slow-running stream, a single candle burns behind linen curtains. Within the modest cottage, the day's chores have ended. Pots are set aside, and wooden tools rest on stone shelves. All is still, save the soft crackle of embers in the hearth. Tonight, a young girl named Eleanor will cross an ancient threshold. Her cot sits near the low window, moonlight spilling across its rough-hewn boards. She stirs, a faint ache in her lower belly, as though the tides of the body have begun their own secret dance. Her breath comes quietly. She lifts her nightdress, fine linen hand-stitched by her mother, and sees a slow, rust-colored truth. The first sign of the Scarlet Cycle. Eleanor's heart flutters, uncertain. In the hush, she wonders, am I alone in this? Has anyone noticed? But the world outside remains unchanged. Only the candle flickers, as if nodding in understanding. Footsteps approach, the soft swish of woolen skirts. Her mother, Maris, pauses at the door. In her arms, she carries a small cloth pouch tied with crimson ribbon. You felt it? Maris asks, voice as calm as twilight. Eleanor nods, eyes wide in the candle's glow. Maris sets the pouch beside the basin of warm water, scented with rosemary sprigs. She kneels, brushing a stray lock of Eleanor's hair behind her ear. Welcome to the Scarlet Cycle, she whispers. It is an old, sacred gift, one all our foremothers have known. The pouch opens. Folded linen squares, soft as clouds, a braided belt woven from wool and silk, and a small pot of pale salve infused with yarrow and chamomile. Each item is made by hand, passed down from mother to daughter for generations. Maris helps Eleanor wrap the belt around her waist, securing a fresh linen pad in place. The fabric feels cool, comforting. Outside, the cicadas hum their lullaby. Within, the hearth's glow pulses like a heartbeat. There is nothing to fear, Maris continues, her tone steady. Tomorrow, we will walk to the old midwife's cottage by the willow. She knows herbs to ease pain and lull the spirit. Eleanor breathes more freely. A slow calm settles in her chest, as if the moon itself has blessed this moment. She lies back on her cot, tucking the blankets around her. The hush of the cottage grows deeper. Each sound is amplified. The crackle of fire, the distant call of an owl, the muffled song of the stream. In these soft notes, Eleanor finds a strange comfort, the knowledge that her body joins a chorus of women stretching back through centuries. She closes her eyes. In dreams, she sees candlelit pages of ancient manuscripts, inked diagrams of humors and seasons. She sees the silhouette of a midwife gathering herbs at dawn, dew trembling on her braid. She sees herself as part of a lineage. Daughters, sisters, mothers, all bound by the quiet rhythm of life. As sleep beckons, Maris stoops to press a mother's kiss upon Eleanor's forehead. Rest now, she murmurs. Tomorrow you will learn the old words, the healing songs. For now, let the Scarlet Cycle cradle you in its gentle promise. So the first night passes, and the scarlet mystery unfolds. The moon arcs higher, then dips toward the horizon. By the time the last ember fades, Eleanor's breath is steady in slumber, her body at peace. And in that stillness, history whispers. Each woman's cycle is a thread in the great tapestry of time, an unbroken pattern of life, renewal, and quiet resilience. The morning arrives not with loud bells or bustling streets, but with a hush of dew on the grass and the low murmur of waking birds. The village, tucked between rolling hills and the edge of a silver stream, stretches slowly beneath a softening sky. Eleanor opens her eyes. She is no longer the same as yesterday. Something invisible has shifted. Though the room remains as it was, the candle snuffed, the linen curtain stirring gently. There is a new rhythm in her breath, a quiet strength, as if she now walks alongside all the women who ever came before her. Her mother, Maris, is already awake. The hearth has been rekindled, and the smell of boiled barley and herbs drifts through the air. Eleanor sits up, quietly adjusting the linen wrap beneath her gown. The cloth is damp but not uncomfortable. She feels held, contained, known. "You've rested well," Maris says, handing her a cup of warm elderflower tea. "Drink slowly. We'll walk after breakfast." No one in the house speaks of it loudly. There are no questions from Eleanor's younger brother. No chatter from the neighbor who passes by the garden fence. Only a silent understanding shared between women. This is how it has always been. After the meal, Maris wraps a woolen shawl around her shoulders and ties a bonnet beneath her chin. Eleanor follows, her braid tucked into a cap stitched with wildflower embroidery. The two step into the morning light. The path to the midwife's cottage is quiet, worn by generations of feet. They pass the baker's stone oven, where bread is rising for the noon meal. They pass the fields where washerwomen scrub linens on flat stones near the brook. Along the way, Maris greets no one, but the women they pass nod slightly, their eyes warm, their smiles knowing. Midwives are keepers of the unseen. They are not only birth guides but guardians of cycles and seasons. They hold secrets passed from grandmother to granddaughter, stored in bundles of dried herbs and recipes written in memory, not ink. The cottage appears at the curve of the wood, half hid beneath a great willow tree whose long arms trail into the grass. Smoke curls from the chimney, and a row of drying plants, sage, mugwort, comfrey, hang along the thatched eaves. Inside, it smells of lavender and beeswax. The floor is packed earth, swept clean and warm. A black cat sleeps curled near the hearth. Midwife Breda appears from the back room. Her gray braid is looped twice around her head like a crown. Her hands are stained faint green with crushed leaves. She does not ask what Eleanor has come for. She only nods, beckons them in, and sets out 3 small cups of rosehip infusion. "You've begun," she says softly to Eleanor, her voice deep and kind. "You've joined the rhythm now. There's no turning back, only moving with it." She lays out a bundle of dried herbs on the table. Yarrow, crampbark, raspberry leaf. She names them slowly, each one a soft note in an ancient melody. She crushes a pinch between her fingers, letting Eleanor smell the sharp sweetness. "This one calms the ache," she explains. "This one slows the flow if it comes too heavy. And this one brings warmth to the belly when it chills." Eleanor listens, her hands folded in her lap. She feels the gentle hum of wisdom in the air. This is not a doctor's office with stern voices and sharp smells. It is a womb-like space, safe, dim, and lined with quiet power. Breda places a warm stone compress wrapped in linen onto Eleanor's abdomen. The pressure is soothing, the scent of rosemary rising gently with the steam. "Some days will be heavy, some days will be light," Breda murmurs. "But all of them are yours." She gives Eleanor a small pouch to carry home, filled with soft herbs and a piece of beeswax to soothe the skin. She also hands her a folded square of soft wool. "This is red thread," she says, "passed from my own teacher. You'll sew it into your wrap. It binds you to the others who wear it, though you may never see them." Eleanor traces the thread with her fingertip. It is a deep, earthy crimson, the color of the womb, the earth, the setting sun. She does not need to say thank you. Her wide eyes and still breath are enough. As they prepare to leave, Breda places a hand on Maris's shoulder. "She's strong," she says. "She listens." Maris smiles quietly. She's always been made of silence and water. And with that, the two begin their walk home. The wind has picked up, rustling through the long grasses. The sky is soft with clouds, and the sun plays behind their edges like a shy child. Eleanor walks slowly, pressing the warmth of the herbs against her belly through her gown. Her mother doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. At the cottage, Eleanor returns to her small room. She sits near the window, sewing the red thread into the edge of her linen wrap with careful fingers. Outside, sparrows chirp and flutter. Inside, time slows again. With each stitch, she feels herself settle deeper into the rhythm of womanhood. Not just bleeding, but preparing, healing, receiving. A secret strength, growing quieter the stronger it becomes. The day passes gently. The pain is there, yes, but softened by steam and sleep, by rose tea and resting hands. By nightfall, Eleanor lies again in her cot, now a little braver. She clutches the herb pouch beneath her pillow and closes her eyes. The Scarlet Cycle has begun, and so has her place in the ancient, moon-led lineage of women who walked before her. The next morning arrives gently, as all good mornings in this quiet village tend to do. The rooster calls once and then falls silent. The hearth is already glowing, the bread dough rising under linen cloth. In her small room, Eleanor slowly awakens. The warmth in her belly has softened. The herbs worked, as Breda said they would. She stretches beneath her woolen blanket, her body still unfamiliar, still adjusting, but no longer afraid. On the small stool beside her cot, her mother has laid out a fresh set of clothes. But these are not her ordinary garments. Folded carefully is a dark red underdress, undyed wool, soft from repeated use. Beside it lies a linen pad, stitched thick, and a wide woven belt with 2 long ties. There's also a small pouch of dried lavender tucked within the folds, a touch of scent to soothe the senses. Eleanor reaches for the pad first. It is hand-cut, layered linen, thick but flexible. She remembers Breda's quiet voice. You must wash it gently, away from others. Let it dry in the shadows. It is yours alone. She slips into the red underdress and ties the belt around her waist, fastening the pad in place with smooth, practiced hands. Does not feel clumsy. Feels ceremonial. Like wrapping a gift. Like preparing to meet a quiet part of herself. Maris enters with a small bowl of warm water and a fresh cloth. She smiles at the sight of her daughter already dressed. Red was always the color, she says softly, sitting beside her. It hides the stains. It honors the moon. Eleanor nods. She hadn't thought of that, but it feels true. There is something sacred about the way the red fabric clings to her form, how it both protects and conceals. In the medieval world, menstruation was not spoken about in town squares or church sermons, but it shaped how women moved, where they sat, how they worked, even what they wore. Every woman, from the lowliest peasant to the lady of the manor, had her own set of wraps and cloths. Many were sewn by hand, reused for years, and quietly folded away in cedar chests or herb-lined drawers. During her days of bleeding, a woman might avoid certain tasks, heavy lifting, long journeys, or standing near sacred objects. But she was never idle. Instead, she wove at the loom, shelled peas by the window, or peeled apples in the shade. Quiet, rhythmic work. Work that let the body breathe. And there were codes, unspoken rules passed from woman to woman. Never let your cloths hang in public view. Dry them beneath other linens, where no man's eye will land. Never burn your bloodied cloth. Bury it near herbs, or soak it in moon water. If another woman bleeds at the same time, share bread and a warm stone. It is a sign of sisterhood. Eleanor spends that day within these quiet boundaries. She sits by the hearth, spinning thread on a spindle her grandmother once used. Her feet are tucked beneath her, her posture easy, her hands slow. At midday, Maris gives her a small red pouch, a monthly bundle. Inside are spare cloths, a small vial of oil, and a beeswax charm molded into the shape of a crescent moon. You'll carry this with you, Maris says, when we visit the manor next week, or when the women gather for the autumn sowing. Eleanor holds the pouch with both hands. It is heavier than it looks, not from weight but meaning. Later, as the sun slips behind the trees, she joins her mother in the back garden. There, between rows of cabbage and thyme, stand wooden poles with linen cloths fluttering in the wind. But none of these are hers. Hers are washed in a separate basin behind the cottage, in water mixed with lavender and sage. She soaks each piece gently, then lays it over a shaded branch, hidden beneath the canopy of ivy. The wind stirs the leaves above. Birds flit between shadows. The cloths sway slightly, red against green, as though they too breathe and rest. She sits nearby with a bowl of warm water and gently presses the damp cloth to her belly. The ache returns now and then, but it no longer surprises her. Feels like part of a conversation. Night falls again, this time quicker than before. The air is cooler, and the sound of crickets rises from the stream bed. Eleanor sits at her little window, the red pouch in her lap. She unties it once more, studies the cloths, the vial, the moon-shaped charm. They are tools, yes, but they are also symbols. Symbols of a quiet power passed from hand to hand. As the candle burns low, she remembers something Breda said. The blood comes and goes, but what remains is your care for it. And so she folds the cloths again, sets the pouch on the stool, and climbs into bed. Outside, the moon glows round and kind. Its light touches the edge of the garden, the drying herbs, the shaded cloths. Inside, a girl sleeps, dressed in red, wrapped in knowledge. And with every beat of her heart, the scarlet cycle deepens its rhythm, soft and unspoken. The bell of the village chapel rings softly across the fields. It is neither urgent nor celebratory, just the regular rhythm of morning prayer. The kind of sound that folds into the background of life, like wind in the trees or the gentle gurgle of water beneath a bridge. Eleanor hears it from her window. She is seated quietly on the floor, folding her linen cloths with care. The last of them has dried overnight beneath the ivy branches outside. She presses them with her palms, smoothing each crease like petals in a pressed bouquet. Downstairs, her mother is placing barley loaves into the hearth oven. The smell of ash and warm dough curls through the house. Outside, neighbors begin their walks to the chapel. Soft shoes on packed dirt, shawls pulled close against the morning chill. Eleanor watches them go but does not join them. For many women in the Middle Ages, the days of bleeding were not just personal. They were sacredly set apart. Not sinful but separate, different, touched by something invisible, and thus treated with silence and distance. Church doctrine in many places viewed menstruation through the lens of ritual purity, a concept drawn from older texts, echoed in medieval sermons. The idea was not that a woman was bad during her cycle, but that she was in a state of transition, of inner movement. And such movement, it was believed, made her unfit to stand too near to the sacred. So she stayed home. She prayed quietly in her chamber, not aloud in the chapel. She did not touch relics or pass bread at the altar. In some towns, she would sit at the very back pew, or remain at the church door, listening to the Mass through wood and stone. Eleanor, though young, feels the weight of this custom now. She knows no one will question her absence. Her mother has likely told the baker's wife. The word would pass softly. Eleanor has entered her red days. And the women would nod, not in judgment, but in memory. Later that morning, as the chapel's songs fade, Maris finds Eleanor near the herb shelves. She's fingering a sprig of dried basil, its crinkled leaves still fragrant. "You'll return to the church in a few days," her mother says gently. "Once the bleeding stops, we'll do the small washing. Then you'll go light a candle." Eleanor nods. The small washing is a ritual more whispered than recorded. Each household does it a little differently. Some use rosemary water. Others recite psalms while wringing out the cloths. Some dip their fingers in oil and make the sign of the cross over the girl's abdomen. It is not a commandment from priests, but a custom held among women. Quiet return to balance. When Eleanor's flow begins to wane on the 5th day, she prepares for this small rite. Her mother fills the basin with warm water steeped with hyssop and a few drops of lavender oil. A clean cloth is folded beside it, along with a change of garments and a pale shawl stitched with ivy leaves. "Breathe in," Maris says. "Wash slowly. Think of release." Eleanor steps into the privacy of the back room. She dips the cloth, wrings it gently, and presses it over her skin. Her movements are steady, her breath soft. Outside the door, her mother hums, Not a song exactly, but a lullaby without words. A sound to soothe the space between sacred and everyday. When the washing is complete, Eleanor dresses in clean clothes and ties her hair in a braid. She feels lighter somehow. Not purified exactly, but integrated. Whole again. Later that afternoon, she walks with her mother to the chapel. The building stands at the edge of the village, its stone walls warmed by the afternoon sun. Ivy clings to its sides, and the door creaks gently when pushed. Inside, the air is cool. Beeswax candles flicker at the altar. The scent of incense lingers in the stones. Eleanor steps forward and kneels at the side aisle. Not at the center, not yet. She lights a small taper from the great candle and sets it into the iron stand. She doesn't say much. Just a whisper. "Thank you for carrying me." It is unclear whether she speaks to her body, or to something beyond it. Perhaps both. In many parts of medieval Europe, the Church's teachings about menstruation were not cruel, but cautious. Clerics wrote long treatises debating whether a woman in her cycle could take communion, touch relics, or receive blessings. Some parishes were strict, enforcing rules of separation. Others turned a blind eye, leaving such decisions to the discretion of midwives and mothers. What remained common, however, was this: menstruation was not discussed openly in church. It was a mystery carried in silence. A burden perhaps, but also a kind of quiet power. Women, after all, were the only ones who carried it. And in that hush there was ownership, private knowledge, a sacred rhythm that could not be read aloud from scripture, but was instead passed in glances and gestures, steam and thread. That evening, Eleanor returns home, her candle still glowing in her heart. She writes a single line in her small cloth-bound notebook, hidden beneath her cot. "My red days have passed, and the world has opened again." She folds the linen cloths, stores the herbs in their jars, and tucks the red pouch into the corner of her chest. The moon, now waning, climbs higher into the sky, and the Scarlet Cycle, though silent for now, lingers, ready to return again like the tide when the time is right. The early morning mist curls low over the fields like soft breath on a windowpane. Dew clings to the edges of rosemary and thyme, and the world seems to wait, silent and pale beneath a sky still holding the hush of dawn. In the distance, just beyond the bend where the willow trees lean into the path, sits Brida's cottage. The old midwife has already been awake for hours. Within her thatched home, the fire has long been lit. The iron pot bubbles softly with crushed herbs and honeycomb. Dried bundles hang from the beams overhead. Mugwort, motherwort, sage, yarrow, each tied with string, some with red thread, some with blue. Her fingers, stained faint green from yesterday's harvest, move slowly over a mortar. She crushes dried bark into powder. The scent, earthy, sharp, and warm, rises with each motion. Her breath is slow. Her movements are careful. Every recipe, every tea, every oil she makes carries the weight of 1,000 cycles before. Outside the cottage, Eleanor and Maris arrive. It has been several days since Eleanor's first red flow ended. Her body feels different now, calmer, wiser, but also curious. The questions come quietly to her, like a stream under ice. What do other women feel? What do they use for pain, for flow, for strength? Brida welcomes them inside with a nod. She does not say, "How are you?" She says, "Let us mix what you need." And the work begins. First the tea. Brida brings a small wooden tray and places it on the table. She selects each dried leaf with intention. Yarrow to steady the bleeding. Red raspberry leaf to tone the womb. Lemon balm to ease the mind. And just a hint of lavender for sweetness and calm. The herbs are dropped into a linen pouch, tied with twine, and lowered gently into a clay pot filled with steaming water. The aroma rises like a memory. Floral, green, slightly bitter. Eleanor cups her hands around the mug as it is poured. The warmth spreads through her fingers and into her chest. She drinks slowly, the way Brida instructs, as if you are teaching your body to listen. Then come the oils. Brida opens a small chest of glass vials and earthen pots. She selects chamomile oil for massage, clove and cinnamon for warmth when the cramps return, a salve made of beeswax, rosehip oil, and mugwort for soothing the lower back. She warms a little of the oil between her palms, then presses her hands gently to Eleanor's abdomen. There are no words, only slow, circular motion. Only the hush of the cottage, the pop of the fire, and the faint rustle of dry leaves outside. Maris watches from across the room. She remembers this same touch many years ago. The first time she sat in this same chair, clutching her belly and blinking through the ache. The same oil, the same warmth, the same silence. These moments are never spoken about in markets or festivals. They are kept here, in quiet rooms, in the hands of women who remember. Breda then prepares a bundle for Eleanor to take home. It includes 2 folded packets of dried herbs, one for monthly tea, one for heavy days, a vial of oil marked with a red stripe, a beeswax tablet molded with the image of a small leaf, pressed with her thumb as she made it, and a piece of parchment gently rolled, with simple symbols showing when to use each mixture. No words, just signs. A crescent moon means night before the flow. A spiral means rub this into the belly. A star means steep this with warm honey. Eleanor holds the bundle in both hands. It is small enough to fit in her satchel, but heavy in a way that settles deep within her. Before they leave, Breda speaks softly. There is no one way to carry your cycle, she says. Each body is its own season. Some are winter, slow and cold. Some are summer, quick and fierce. You must learn your weather. Eleanor nods. She doesn't yet know her weather, but she will. Maris leans forward, tucking a few coins into a small pouch and placing it near Breda's chair. It is not payment, not exactly. More a gesture of thanks. Ritual. The pouch is made of old fabric, stitched with care. Every woman who comes here leaves one behind. Breda places it on a shelf with many others, some faded with age, some still bright. Each one, a silent record of those who came to learn the language of their blood. The walk home is quiet. Eleanor presses the herb bundle to her chest, holding it close as they pass through the woods. The wind moves gently, as if listening to her thoughts. She hears the rustle of leaves and thinks of the red thread sewn into her cloths. The oil on her skin still lingers. Her womb feels warm, not heavy. By the time they reach the cottage, the sun is low. The sky glows golden, and the birds call good night from the orchard trees. Eleanor places her herb bundle on her bedside stool, unwraps the tea, and lights a single beeswax candle. Its scent reminds her of Breda's hands, sure and slow. She lies back beneath her blanket, one hand resting on her belly. The cycle is quiet now, but it will return. And when it does, she will be ready, with herbs, with oil, with memory, and most of all, with care. The wheel of the year turns gently, like a spindle between quiet hands. As Eleanor's second cycle draws near, so too does the end of summer. The orchards wear golden halos. Wheat stands tall in the fields, heavy with ripeness. Bees, slow with sweetness, drift among the last of the meadow flowers. The air carries the scent of warm soil and sun-dried herbs. Within the rhythm of the land, women's bodies follow patterns of their own. Eleanor wakes one morning to the familiar heaviness in her lower belly, a deep, quiet pull that stirs before the scarlet flow begins. She has felt it once before, and now she recognizes its voice. Her body, like the earth, has its own seasons. Breda once said, "The womb is like a garden. It knows when to grow, when to rest, when to release." This time, Eleanor does not feel afraid. She lights a small candle, pours warm water into the basin, and prepares her cloths without being told. She selects her red underdress and knots the linen belt with firm, practiced fingers. The herbs from Breda's pouch, red raspberry leaf and a pinch of chamomile, are steeped into tea. The house is quiet. Her mother simply places a hand on her shoulder in passing. No words are exchanged. Everything flows as it should. In the medieval world, women often marked their cycles not with calendars, but with the land. They bled at harvest or during the spring thaw. Some flowed during the apple blossom, others during frost. It was said among older women that a womb favored the moon, not the one carved in stone above the church door, but the real one, bright and round in the sky. Count from the new moon to your first ache, Breda had said once. Then you'll learn the pull of your own tide. Eleanor watches the night sky from her window that evening. A half-moon hangs, pale and gentle. She thinks of all the women she's never met who look at the same sky and feel the same ache. Her breath deepens. As the seasons shifted, so too did the remedies. In summer, women favored cooling herbs, mint, elderflower and rose, to soothe the heat of swollen bodies. Linen wraps were rinsed in stream water and hung beneath shaded trees. In autumn, like now, they used grounding roots, burdock, angelica, and mugwort. They drank warm teas to help with letting go. Winter's cycles were harder. The cold made the belly clench. Women stayed near the hearth, layering wool upon wool. They tucked hot stones wrapped in cloth against their backs and sipped cinnamon and clove. And in spring, the body awakened quickly. The flow often came earlier, brisker. Women spoke of cleansing, of newness, of soft rains washing through them. They bathed with thyme and violet, and let the wind carry away what was no longer needed. Eleanor didn't yet know these full patterns, but she would. Her second cycle is heavier. She notices more pain on the second day, a deep cramp that pulses low and stubborn. She folds herself into a bundle near the hearth, clutching her warm stone. Her mother kneels beside her, rubbing the salve gently along her back. The scent of mugwort and wax rises. "You're opening," Maris says softly. "Like soil before planting." Eleanor lets the ache move through her. She listens to it. She does not fight it. There is nothing wrong. This too is part of the rhythm. Later that evening, she writes in her notebook, "My pain is not punishment. It is permission. Pause. To feel." On the third day, the flow slows. Eleanor walks slowly through the garden, basket in hand. She gathers sage leaves, lets her fingers brush against the lavender stems. Her red dress trails softly behind her in the dirt. At the edge of the field, she sees an older woman, Mrs. Tilda, kneeling to collect onions. The two women lock eyes for a brief moment. Tilda smiles and nods once. No words, only recognition. That night, Maris speaks of her own seasons. "When I was your age," she says, as they slice apples by candlelight, "I always bled with the frost. Every year. Just as the leaves began to fall, my belly would stir. By the time snow came, I was ready to rest." Eleanor listens, chin tucked in hand. "Your grandmother," Maris continues, "bled during thunder, always in the storms. She said her womb answered to the sky." They laugh gently. Eleanor imagines her grandmother standing strong in the doorway during rain, arms crossed, unbothered by the world's noise. "It is not always easy," Maris admits. "There were seasons when food was scarce, and the blood came too early, or not at all, when the body held grief instead of rhythm, when the land and the womb both refused to give. But even then they waited, because all things, soil, sky, spirit, move in cycles. Even the silence has a pattern." By the end of her second cycle, Eleanor feels something bloom inside her. Not strength in the way knights speak of it, but steadiness, quiet root. She writes again, "My body is not separate from the land. It is part of the turning, part of the wheel." The moon begins to grow full again. The herbs are gathered, the cloths are washed, and the Scarlet Cycle continues its sacred path. Night falls early now. The sun dips below the hills before the final basket of apples is shelved, before the final hen has settled on her perch. The scent of smoke clings to the damp air. Across the village, shutters are drawn, hearths are lit, and the world tucks itself into quiet. Eleanor sits with her mother in the weaving room. A low fire glows in the stone hearth, casting long golden shadows across the floorboards. Bundles of wool rest in wooden baskets, and the clack of the loom has gone still for the evening. Tonight the loom is silent, Tonight is not for work, but for stories. Outside, the wind picks at the thatch roof. Inside, the warmth gathers. Other women begin to arrive, just as they do each week on the dark moon. There is Tilda, the widow with quick wit and slow knees. Agnes, mother of 5, her laugh echoing long before her footsteps reach the door. And Jonah, whose eyes miss nothing and whose fingers smell always of thyme and ash. They bring their spinning tools, small bundles of nettle fiber, and pots of spiced cider. But they also bring something else, something quieter. They bring their stories. Eleanor sits near the fire, her red shawl drawn over her shoulders. She listens. She does not yet speak. She has only passed through her cycle twice now. She is still learning. Tilda chuckles as she kneels by the fire, her joints cracking. "You remember the first time I bled during a feast day," she says. "Didn't realize until I stood to pass the salt and saw my chair looking like it had been to battle." The women laugh, gently, not cruelly. Agnes nods. "My first time came while I was climbing the orchard wall. Nearly fainted from the shock. Thought I'd been bitten by a spirit." Jonah rolls her eyes. "Spirits? I thought I'd been cursed. Hid the cloths for days before I dared tell my aunt." Even Maris, Eleanor's mother, smiles and adds, "My flow once came the morning of a holy procession. I marched half the town in red without knowing." The laughter fades into a hum of comfort, like embers settling in the ash. No one here is ashamed. No one here lowers her voice when she speaks of bleeding. Within these walls, the Scarlet Cycle is not hidden. It is honored. As the cider is passed around, so too are pieces of cloth, linens with hand-sewn edges, marked by generations of women. Some are plain, some dyed faint rose. One has tiny forget-me-nots embroidered in the corner. "Mine was stitched by my grandmother," Jonah says, folding it neatly. "She said if I bled on flowers, it meant luck." Tilda adds, "Mine has a patch from an old baptism gown. Waste not." Eleanor fingers the edge of her own cloth in her lap. It is newer than the others, but it now carries the memory of 2 cycles. 2 quiet journeys. She thinks for a moment of adding something to it. Perhaps a red thread knot, perhaps a crescent moon. Agnes leans over and whispers, "You'll have a drawer full in 10 years. Just you wait." Then the stories soften. The room grows quieter. The wind outside presses more firmly on the shutters. Someone throws another log on the fire. And then, in voices barely above breath, the women speak of the other side of the cycle. Of blood that comes too early, or too late. Of flows that never come at all. Of bellies that swell and then still. They speak not as women telling secrets, but as guardians sharing truths. "I bled for 40 days once," Tilda murmurs. "After my 3rd child." "I haven't bled in 2 moons, Agnes says, eyes lowering. "I don't feel the change yet. But I know." No one rushes her. No one explains. They simply nod. Because all women, in time, come to know the many faces of the cycle. Not just its first arrival, but its turning, its fading, its grief, and its silence. Eleanor listens with her whole body. She doesn't understand all of it yet, but she feels the weight of their words settling inside her, like stones gently placed in a basket. She knows that one day, she will sit in a room like this and whisper her own story. The evening ends slowly. The women begin to gather their shawls and baskets. Hugs are shared. Cider mugs are emptied. The last stories are spoken with eyes half closed. As they step back into the night, the stars spill across the sky like spilled flour. Cold air rushes in. The door closes gently behind them. Eleanor helps her mother fold the wool blankets. She places her cloth back in its box, now warm from her lap. As the fire dims, Maris speaks in a whisper. "Now you know. We all carry it. Not just the blood, but the laughter, and the ache." Eleanor nods. In her sleep that night, she dreams of spinning red thread across the moon. She dreams of a loom that weaves silence into strength. She dreams of women's hands, folding cloth, pouring tea, pressing oil into aching bellies. She dreams, and she understands. that the Scarlet Cycle is more than the body. It is memory. It is story. It is sisterhood in the quiet. The days shorten now. Morning mist lingers longer on the hills. The garden rests beneath soft frost. The hens lay fewer eggs, and the fire in the hearth is coaxed to life before dawn. Eleanor sits by the window, wrapping her hands around a warm mug of barley tea. The scarlet flow has not yet returned this month. She watches the sky, tracing the curve of the clouds. Somewhere in her belly, there is stillness. Not worry. Not yet. Just the quiet curiosity of a new rhythm. Beside her, her mother kneads bread, eyes soft, movements slow. She doesn't ask. She doesn't press. She knows the body is a tide, and sometimes the moon waits. In the medieval world, a mist cycle meant many things. For the young and unwed, it might stir fear. For the married, hope. For the ill, confusion. And for the aging, a quiet awareness of time's shifting thread. It was never spoken of publicly, but among women, in the hush of spinning rooms and gardens, in the back corner of the bathhouse, the whispers passed. It's been 5 weeks since my red. I bled once in summer, and not since. The last moon came and went, but nothing from me. And with those whispers came 1,000 interpretations. Some said it was a cooling of the womb, a need for warmth and ginger. Others blamed a fright or bad dreams. Some saw it as a gift from the Virgin. Others, a warning from the saints. Whatever the reason, the absence was always noticed. It was a gap in the story, a pause in the song. And in that silence came questions. Eleanor feels the stillness growing. She walks more slowly now, pressing her palm gently to her lower belly as she feeds the chickens or gathers firewood. There's no pain, just an alertness, like the earth before a rain. Her mother finally speaks one morning, while stirring lentils in the pot. "You've missed one, haven't you?" Eleanor nods, eyes lowered. "It hasn't come since the last moon." "Are you afraid?" Maris asks gently. Eleanor shakes her head. "Only unsure." And that is truth enough. The remedies for a missed moon varied from village to village, woman to woman. Some midwives prescribed a hot footbath with parsley and rue. Others gave a potion brewed from juniper, pepper, and red wine, to stir the blood back into motion. In secret, some women walked alone into the woods and sat beneath elder trees, whispering prayers to the old spirits. They offered petals, or drops of honey, or nothing at all but breath. Sometimes the flow returned, sometimes it did not. Breda, the midwife, is visited again. Eleanor and Maris arrive just after sunset. The air is thick with the scent of fennel and smoke. Breda's door creaks open, and she lets them in with a glance. She says nothing of Eleanor's face, now more solemn. She says nothing of the way Maris's hand rests on her daughter's shoulder. Instead, she places 3 candles in a row on the table, each one carved with a small crescent. She lights them slowly. "You are here," she says, "because the cycle has paused." Eleanor nods. Breda kneels before her and takes her hands. Her fingers are cool and dry, her touch gentle. "There is no shame in pause," she murmurs. "Only listening." She places her ear softly to Eleanor's belly, not for a heartbeat, not for signs of life, but for silence, for the absence of motion, for whatever might be waiting to speak. Then she prepares a tea. It is darker than usual, root heavy, with angelica and pennyroyal. She hands it to Eleanor with care. "Sip. Slowly. This may return your red. Or it may not. Either is a path." They sit in silence as the candles burn low. Eleanor feels the warmth travel down her spine. Her belly stirs faintly, not with pain but with awareness. A gateway is forming, though she cannot yet see where it leads. Back home, the nights pass one by one. Each morning, Eleanor checks her cloths, and each morning, they remain dry. There is no panic, no rushing to conclusions, only the rhythm of waiting. Maris tells her stories in the evenings. "Your aunt missed her flow for 3 moons once," she says, sipping broth. "Breda gave her warm honeyed sage every day, and by the 4th moon, It returned like nothing had changed. She adds after a pause. And your cousin lost hers for good last spring. It was the start of her change. She was only 31. Eleanor listens closely. The stories do not frighten her. They feel like roads in a forest. Some bend, some vanish, some circle back. But all of them lead forward. On the 12th day, the flow returns. It begins as a whisper, a faint pull, a warmth, a single spot. And more. And more. Eleanor breathes deeply as she folds the red cloth around herself once more. Her body has spoken again, and this time she has heard it clearly. She returns to her notebook and writes with steady hand. I was not broken, only resting. I was not late. I was listening. And as the moon wanes once more, she presses a fresh sprig of sage between the pages and closes the book. The snow begins to fall, first in flurries, then in soft, steady veils, dusting rooftops, blanketing the paths, curling in the hollows of hedgerows and stone walls. The village quiets even more, wrapped now in white. Inside her cottage, Eleanor watches the flakes gather on the windowsill. She has always loved this hush, the way winter silences the world without asking permission. Even the geese pass more slowly overhead, as though remembering something old and heavy. Today her cycle has ended. The cloths have been washed and hung beneath the covered porch, safe from wind. Her body is quiet again, empty yet full. She pulls her red shawl tighter around her and sits by the hearth, where the fire paints the room in amber. In the medieval imagination, color held meaning far beyond appearance, especially for women. Red and white were not simply shades, they were symbols, sacred opposites, living metaphors that touched every part of life, from birth to burial. Red was the color of blood, course, but not just menstrual blood. It was also the blood of childbirth, of martyrdom, of covenant and sacrifice. It was warmth, heat, intensity, life force. Sometimes holy, sometimes feared, but always active. Red meant power, pain, promise. It meant something is happening. White, by contrast, meant silence, purity, faith. It was the color of linen cloths, bridal veils, candle wax, and bones. White was emptiness, but also potential. It meant something has passed, or has not yet come. Eleanor folds her shawl and watches the two colors appear again and again in the room around her. Red, the burning coals in the hearth. White, the steam rising from her mother's soup pot. Red, the ribbon at the edge of her cycle pouch. White, the snow falling outside, steady and sure. Her own body carries both. It always has. When she bleeds, the red teaches her about strength. When she does not, the white teaches her about rest. She thinks of the church altar, dressed in white cloths on holy days, and of Brida's salve, warm and red-brown like drying petals, of candles lit in both joy and grief, of saints painted in robes of crimson and ivory. She realizes now, she is not the first to hold both. In some parts of Europe, folk beliefs went even further. Some said a woman's balance of red and white determined her fertility. Too much red, the body runs hot, the womb dries. Too much white, the blood retreats, the moon's rhythm falters. So women were told to eat accordingly. Red lentils in winter, white barley in spring, red wine to stir passion, goat's milk to calm. Even dreams were colored. To dream of red roses might mean passion or pregnancy. To dream of white cloths might mean loss or peace. And always beneath it all was the cycle, turning, turning, turning. A wheel painted in red and white. That afternoon, Eleanor takes out her notebook once more. She opens to a clean page and presses her fingers lightly across it. Blank. She breathes in slowly, letting her fingers dip into a small pot of red ink. With care, she draws a single spiral in the center of the page. Slow and deliberate, like a snail shell, like a woman walking a labyrinth. Around the spiral, she writes, I am made of red and white, of fire and snow, of bleeding and resting. She does not know who she writes for. Perhaps for herself. Perhaps for the women yet to come. That evening, her mother sits across from her, sewing a hem. Eleanor asks softly, "Did you ever feel afraid of the blood?" Maris shakes her head slowly. "No. I feared only not understanding it." She continues stitching, the needle passing in and out, silver glint catching the firelight. "But I was told once," she adds, "that the blood comes to remind us we're still here, still changing, still part of something larger." Eleanor nods. That night, she dreams of walking barefoot through fresh snow, her shawl trailing behind her. In the dream, every step she takes leaves behind not a footprint, but a red blossom. Like roses unfolding in silence. The snow does not cover them, cradles them, and she walks on, quiet and unafraid. The winter wind hums against the shutters. It's a gentle sound, not a storm, more like a lullaby woven by air, rustling dried leaves and slipping under door frames. Inside the cottage, the hearth glows with a low, steady flame, and Eleanor is curled in a blanket, her second cycle of the season unfolding slowly within her. It is the second day. The ache is deeper now, an old, steady drum beneath her ribs and in her hips. Not sharp, not alarming, just there. Reminder. A rhythm. She stirs gently and reaches for the mug of warm cider beside her, sweetened with clove and honey. Her belly welcomes the warmth like a dear friend. Her body is speaking, and she is learning to listen. In the medieval world, a woman's cravings during her red days were not dismissed. They were honored. The midwives would say, "What you crave tells you what your blood is saying." If a woman longed for salt, it meant she was letting go too fast. If she wanted sweets, her womb was weeping slowly, needing softness. If she thirsted for wine, it meant her spirit was tired and required warmth. Eleanor had craved bread soaked in broth yesterday. Today she wants fruit, dried pears with thyme and a dusting of nutmeg. Her mother prepares a small plate and sets it near the hearth. No words are needed. The offering is understood. Each household had its own remedies. In Brida's cottage, a carved wooden board lists dozens. Goat's milk warmed with honey and cardamom for weak flow. Apple slices baked with sage for cramping. Pickled turnips for women who felt dizzy. A spoon of mustard seed in cider for sluggish bleeding. A warm bowl of lentils and onions for strength. Nothing was measured with spoons. Only by the hand, by the eye, by the heart. Women cooked during their cycles not to feed others, but to soothe themselves. And no one questioned it. Eleanor remembers last month how Agnes shared her story by the hearth. "I once bled for 9 days, she said, sipping thyme tea. Didn't know what to do until Brida gave me blackberries stewed with basil. The next morning it stopped. Just like that." Others spoke of odd pairings. Figs and vinegar, salted cream, rosemary sugar. "They sound strange," Maris had whispered to Eleanor once. "But each one speaks to a different body." And Eleanor believes that now. As she sips her cider, she feels her shoulders lower, her belly warm, her limbs soften. The ache hasn't vanished, but it no longer commands her. It's part of her now, a voice she understands. In some villages, women were given small tokens during their red days. Little gifts. A beeswax candle scented with lavender. A pouch of dried cherries from last summer. A spoon carved with a red thread wound through its handle. These were not grand gestures but sacred ones. Each said, "I see you. I know you are passing through the blood." In Eleanor's house, they kept a little chest for such things, called the resting box. Held a sprig of dried mint, a silk ribbon for the hair, a tiny bottle of rose oil, and a charm in the shape of a curled fern. When her pain grew strong, she opened it. Not to cure herself, but to remember. She was allowed to rest. As the day darkens, Maris brings a bowl of broth to the hearth. It smells of rosemary and garlic, thickened with barley and softened with leeks. Eleanor sips it slowly. The steam curls around her face. She thinks of women in stone houses centuries before, holding the same kind of bowl. She thinks of young girls in towers, midwives in valleys, women kneeling in fields. All of them once wrapped in wool, bleeding quietly, sipping broth. She is not alone. She never has been. Later, before sleep, she writes one more note in her cloth-bound book. My hunger is not greed. It is a message. My body remembers what it needs. My task is to listen. The wind hushes now. The fire falls to its softest light. The cider mug is empty, the plate of pears nearly gone. And Eleanor rests, held by heat, hunger, and the ancient comfort of women who once bled just like this, tended by warm hands and fed by knowing hearts. The full moon rises like a silver crown over the treetops. It floats high above the fields, bathing the world in quiet light. The snow sparkles as if laced with stars, and the bare branches of the forest stretch upward like cathedral spires. Eleanor stands at the edge of the path, shawl wrapped tight, her breath rising in little clouds. Behind her, the village sleeps. Ahead, the woods beckon, dark, still, waiting. Tonight is not for chores, not for tea, not even for stories by the hearth. Tonight is for remembering something older, something whispered, something only women speak of. Maris joins her, a bundle in her arms. Candles, a pouch of herbs, a folded cloth. Her face is unreadable but calm. She does not ask Eleanor if she's ready. She simply nods, and they begin to walk. Their boots crunch gently over the frost-covered earth. The moon casts their shadows long across the lane. Above, an owl calls once, then silence again. They are not the only ones walking. Here and there, between trees and hedges, other shapes move. Shawls flutter, bundles sway. From barns, from cottages, from quiet doorways, women drift like moths toward the wood. They do not speak. Not yet. Their gathering is not for the world of men. At the center of the forest, the women form a ring. There is a clearing here, round and soft with pine needles, sheltered from wind. The moon hangs directly above it. A low stone rests at the center, flat as a table. Candles are placed in a circle. No one counts them. They do not need to. The flame is not what matters. The intention is. One by one they take out their cloths. Not the clean ones, not the washed and folded linens, but those stained deep red. Not from shame, from use, from life. They fold them again and lay them on the stone. Tribute. Memory. Eleanor watches with wide eyes. This is her first time attending. She had heard the whispers before, of course, but never knew the truth. She feels the weight of the cloth in her own pouch, warmed by her body, quiet in its pouch of twine. She steps forward and lays it beside the others. Her fingers tremble slightly, not from cold, but from reverence. Once all are placed, the oldest woman among them, Marta, with her white braid and weathered hands, steps forward. Her voice is soft but steady. We gather under the moon as those before us did. We bring our blood not as burden but as bond. We leave behind the stain. And we carry forward the strength. No one claps. No one bows. They simply listen, each heart beating softly, each womb resting or stirring, each life tied to the red thread of another. Marta lights the final candle. Its flame flickers once, then steadies. The women begin to hum, low at first like wind through hollow wood, tone without words, a song older than memory. Mswe, Tmnil. One places a sprig of rosemary on the cloths, another adds dried lavender. The scent rises with the warmth of breath and flame. Eleanor closes her eyes. The sound wraps around her like a shawl. She feels the presence of those no longer alive. Her grandmother, her great-aunts, women whose names were never recorded, whose blood once flowed under a moon just like this one. She is not alone. She never was. When the humming fades, the women begin to speak. Not aloud, but in whispers to one another, to themselves, to the trees. May my flow be gentle. May my ache bring no harm. May my body teach me what I've forgotten. May my daughter bleed without fear. Eleanor whispers too. Not a wish but a promise. I will carry this with grace. The ritual ends without announcement. The women gather their cloths, now folded with care, touched by firelight and moon. They blow out the candles one by one. They embrace. They nod. Smile. Then they part. No farewell is needed. The bond is already sealed, in breath, in blood, in silence. On the walk home, the forest seems brighter. The moon has risen higher. The wind is softer, more like a hush than a howl. Eleanor walks beside Maris in silence. They do not speak until they reach the cottage, where the fire is still warm and the kettle gently steaming. As they remove their boots and hang their shawls, Maris speaks softly. Some say the moon is drawn by the sea, but I think it is drawn by women. Eleanor smiles. Later, tucked into her blanket, the cloth safe in its pouch once more, she writes, "The moon saw me, and I did not look away." The bells ring faintly from the chapel tower. Not a call to mass, just the small evening chime that echoes over rooftops and grazing fields. The sound rolls softly through the village like a breath through linen curtains. Eleanor sits near the hearth, her hands folded over her knees. The fire burns low. Her red days have ended again, her body emptied and restored, her cloths hung to dry. But tonight her thoughts are not with herbs or heat, not with pain or comfort. Tonight her thoughts are with the church, and with the strange silence that falls there, when the topic turns to blood. In the Middle Ages, the church held many ideas about menstruation. Some whispered, some written, all wrapped in layers of belief, fear, and misunderstanding. A woman's bleeding was seen not as natural, but as something fallen, a reminder of Eve, of sin, of the need for purity. Some texts said a menstruating woman should not touch the altar. Others said she should not receive communion. A few even claimed her very presence might wither crops or cloud mirrors. Not everywhere, not everyone, but the beliefs were strong and slow to change. Eleanor remembers last Lent. She had bled on the morning of the holy procession and had not told anyone. She'd simply stepped aside, watched from a distance as others filed past with candles and psalms, her shawl tight around her shoulders. Maris had not scolded her. She had only said, "You are not unclean, only quiet." But still, Eleanor had felt something, like being both present and absent at once. There was no shame in the red days among the women. But in the chapel, the silence was sharper. The priest never mentioned bleeding. He spoke of birth, yes, and pain, and Mary's womb, and saints who had visions, but never of the monthly tide that visited every woman in the pews. It was as if it did not exist, as if all the world's red was poured only into the chalice, never into a cloth. Some women, like Marta, shrugged it off. "The priest doesn't bleed," she once said, "so how would he know what to say?" Others, like Breda, kept the sacred in their own hands, mixing herbs and lighting candles when no one watched. "We have our own altars," she said once, folding a clean cloth. Still the conflict lingered. Even gentle girls learned to flinch when their flow came during feast days. Even the devout wondered if their prayers counted less when whispered during red weeks. Even the most learned women sometimes lowered their eyes during confession. Eleanor wonders now, why was the blood that gave life seen as impure? In other corners of the world, not every faith treated menstruation with fear. Some saw it as a time of vision, a moment when the veil between spirit and flesh thinned, a sign of divine timing. But in Eleanor's world, where the chapel bells marked the hours and saints watched from painted wood, the rules were stricter, though not always followed. In secret, women still lit candles while bleeding, still prayed, still held rosaries. Some even believed Mary herself had once bled, quietly, in the days before Gabriel came. It was never preached, but it was known. One evening, while brushing out her hair, Eleanor asks Maris, "Do you think God minds the blood?" Her mother pauses. She sets down the comb, sits beside her, and answers carefully, "I think men wrote the books, but the body came from somewhere older than parchment." Eleanor nods. That feels true. She presses her fingers gently against her belly, not in pain but in thanks. Later that week, Eleanor visits the chapel again. She sits near the back, where the stone is coldest and the candles flicker weakest. The air smells of wax, old prayers, and wood smoke. She looks up at the statue of Saint Agatha, her hand pressed against her heart, her face soft with suffering and strength. And quietly, Eleanor whispers, "I bleed. I bleed as my mother bled. I bleed as you once may have bled. And I am still worthy." The words do not echo, but they settle in her like bread. Outside, the snow begins again, gentle, forgiving, unbothered by the noise of old doctrine. Eleanor walks home with her shawl pulled close, her steps slow, her head lifted. She knows now. The red days are not sin. They are not silence. They are the body's psalm. And even if the church never says so, she will remember it herself. Begins with a dream. Eleanor is standing in a meadow, full of poppies and wild thyme. The sky above her is heavy with clouds, not stormy, just expectant, as though something waits just beyond the hills. She walks slowly. The wind tugs at her sleeves. And then, in the dream, she sees it. A thin ribbon of red weaving through the grass, winding toward her feet like a path. She follows it. When she wakes, her fingers rest gently on her belly. There is no pain yet, no blood. But the dream told her what she already knew. The flow is coming. In the Middle Ages, before calendars and clocks ruled every hour, women learned to read the language of their bodies. They noticed small changes. Not just blood, but the signs that whispered before it. The way the breasts felt tender to the touch. The sudden craving for vinegar or sweets. The dream of red cloth. The dull weight behind the knees. The heat in the cheeks. The restlessness at twilight. Each sign was a message. Some women kept a bundle of pebbles or beans. One moved each day to track the cycle. Others tied a knot in a cord or carved a tiny line into wood. But more often than not, they simply felt it. Their bodies spoke in ways parchment never could. Eleanor feels the signs now, too. Her skin has grown more sensitive. Even the brush of wool makes her pause. Her dreams are vivid. Moons, rivers, warm herbs pressed into her palms. She finds herself moving more slowly, sitting more, stirring soups longer, even when they're already done. She doesn't rush. She watches. She waits. In Brida's cottage, there is a shelf labeled only with painted stars. It holds tiny jars, each marked not with names but with symbols. Petals, seeds, moons, flame. Brida explains gently. These are not for the flow. These are for the signs before. She lifts a tiny glass jar containing dried fennel root and rose. This helps the breasts soften. Another holds dried lemon balm and linden flowers. This keeps the heart still when it wants to race. Brida adds with a smile. You don't wait until the rain falls to patch your roof. You prepare when the clouds gather. Eleanor thinks of how her mother used to notice before she did. You're quiet today, she'd say. Or, you've been curling your toes again. And always within a day or two the blood would come. It wasn't magic. It was memory. A knowledge passed not through books, but through watching. Through being with the body, not against it. Some signs were seen as sacred. In a few villages, it was said that if a woman dreamed of a stag before her red days, it meant she would one day bear a child. If she dreamed of a cracked egg, her body was asking for warmth. If she saw her own hands stained in crimson, it was the moon calling her back to her center. These were not warnings. They were reminders. The body is not a stranger. It is a companion, whispering in symbols. As the day stretches toward dusk, Eleanor begins to prepare. Not because she is in pain, but because the signs have arrived. She lays out her cloths, folds a clean shift, lights a beeswax candle with rosemary oil, brews a small pot of thyme and clove, and she writes in her notebook, "Before the blood, there are stirrings, like wind before the rain. My body tells me, I am not caught by surprise. I am returned." She closes the book gently and pulls her shawl around her. Outside, the sun lowers behind the hills. The sheep are quiet. The fields are white with frost. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once. its wings slicing through the dusk like a needle through thread. And Eleanor waits, not in fear, not in discomfort, but in partnership with the body that has always known before she did. The flow is near. She feels it in her bones. She welcomes it like an old friend. Morning breaks like soft butter spread across bread. The air is pale gold. The frost on the thatch glistens. And from within the cottage, the faint clink of glass and the rustle of dried herbs can be heard. Breda is already at work. Her door is always unlocked. Midwives in the Middle Ages were more than birth keepers. They were listeners, healers, guardians of secrets that had no place in the pulpit or town square. And when a woman's red days grew too heavy, or too late, or too long in returning, it was Breda they turned to, not the priest. Because Breda understood the rhythm of a woman's body the way a shepherd understands hills. Slowly, with patience, with love, Eleanor steps into the cottage just as the second candle is lit. The smell of lavender and warm vinegar fills the air. Breda turns, smiling with her soft-lined eyes, and gestures her in. "She's come early," the old midwife says aloud, though more to the room than to anyone in it. A sure sign the moon is near. She beckons Eleanor to the long wooden table at the center. Laid out before them, bundles of dried yarrow and cramp bark, 2 folded cloths, one still warm from the hearth, a wide earthen bowl with calendula floating in oil, small stones, smooth and black, sitting in a bed of thyme. Eleanor doesn't ask questions. She simply sits. Breda nods, pleased. The old midwife begins with the herbal rub. She warms her hands over the hearth, dips her fingers into the oil, and gently presses them against Eleanor's lower belly. "Too many women carry tightness here," she murmurs. "We hold grief in our wombs, even when we don't know it." The fingers move in slow, circular strokes. Not invasive, not clinical, just kind. Breda's knowledge didn't come from books. It came from watching her own mother prepare willow bark tea, from kneeling beside her aunt as they gathered nettles in spring, from years of catching babies, drying tears, soaking cloths. She had learned that blood had moods, thin and light. The body is cooling, thick and dark, carries memory, sudden and sharp. The heart has something to say. She never made charts. She made stories. "The blood is like a river," she once told Eleanor. "It winds, it pauses, it floods, it dries. But it always knows the way home." After the oiling, Breda takes a stone from the thyme bed, warm now from the herbs and fire. She wraps it in a soft linen cloth and presses it gently against Eleanor's stomach. The weight is grounding. The scent of thyme rises with the warmth. Breda hums softly. Just a few notes, the melody barely more than breath. But Eleanor feels it settle in her chest, loosening something that had been tight all week. She exhales slowly. "That's it," Breda whispers. "Let your body speak." Next comes the tea. Breda hands her a small cup, the steam curling like ribbon. Inside, chamomile, rose petals, just a touch of cinnamon for heat. Eleanor sips. The flavor is floral and earthy, like walking through a garden after rain. As she drinks, Breda speaks not to her, but into the space between them. "They think midwives only come when there's a baby on the way. But I've caught more pain than birth in my time." She gently presses behind Eleanor's knees. "Here we hold tension too. And here," she taps the ribs, "is where we swallow words we never say." When the cup is empty, Breda hands Eleanor a final item. A square of red wool, soft and slightly frayed at the edges. "Tuck this under your shift when the ache grows sharp. It remembers." Eleanor smiles. "Remembers what?" Breda's eyes gleam. "That you are not alone. That others have bled before you, and bled well. In many villages, there was no apothecary, no surgeon, only the midwife. And though she had no license, no seal, her hands were trusted more than scrolls. She made healing out of scraps and silence. A whisper here, tincture there, a poultice pressed between 2 hands, a story passed from mouth to mouth like prayer. Her knowledge was not written. It was woven. Before Eleanor leaves, Breda lays a hand over her heart. "You're not broken," she says softly. "You're blooming." Eleanor's eyes blur with sudden warmth. She presses her hand over Breda's in return. "Thank you," she whispers. And she means it. Outside, the frost has melted in places, small rivulets running between the stones. The midwife's touch still lingers on her skin, and more importantly, within her. The pain is not gone, but now it is held. Eleanor walks home with the red wool folded in her pocket, the scent of time clinging to her shift, and the deep knowing that in every village somewhere a woman like Breda waits, ready to touch. 10. Teach. The night is cold, but the cottage is full. Inside Maris's front room, the fire crackles low and golden, and the air hums with the scent of mulled cider and dried rosemary. There are blankets folded over stools, cushions on the floor, and a small plate of oat cakes passed slowly from hand to hand. The wives are gathering. Eleanor sits near the fire, her legs tucked beneath her, cradling a warm cup in both hands. These are the elder women, the ones with silver threads in their braids, and soft lines around their eyes. They speak with slow certainty. They laugh without apology. And tonight, they have gathered not to solve or heal, but simply to remember. It begins, as it often does, with a joke. Marta, the oldest of them all, leans forward and says in a mock whisper, "I once bled so hard I stained the bishop's sleeve and didn't tell him until Mass was over." The room bursts into soft laughter. Even Eleanor giggles, her cheeks flushing. Someone passes her another cake. The circle of wives is not formal, has no leader, no rules, no script. But it forms every few months around the hearth, when the wind sharpens and the moon begins to wax. It's not just for bleeding women, it's for those who have bled. And tonight, the women are remembering their first times. Bruna speaks next. Her voice is quiet, almost musical. "I was 12. Thought I'd been bitten by a fox in the night. Ran crying to my mother. She just handed me a rag and a figure." The wives nod knowingly. Nella adds, "I was too proud to say anything. I bled straight through a petticoat and pretended it was rust." They all laugh again. Eleanor smiles softly, her hand resting over her belly. These women do not speak in shame. They speak in solidarity. They go on. "I hid mine for weeks, too afraid to ask for cloths. My aunt danced when she saw it. Said I'd joined the Red Sisterhood. I thought it would kill me. Then I was annoyed when it stopped after 2 days." There is no bitterness in their words, just memory. A tapestry of lived moments, patched together in firelight. Eleanor listens. Each story sinks into her like a drop into a still pond. She realizes something quietly. Each woman here once sat where she does now, new to the rhythm, uncertain of what the blood might mean. And they survived. Not just the pain, but the confusion, the silence, the weight. Together, in circles like this one. Marta, stirring her cup, speaks again. Her voice slows. "It's funny. I don't miss the mess of it. But I miss the way it reminded me I was alive." She pauses. The ache, the cravings, the warmth. All of it meant my body was doing something. Now the moons pass without me. But I remember. A few women bow their heads slightly. Not in mourning. In honor. Maris chimes in next, smiling toward Eleanor. "I remember when your flow first came. You didn't tell me for 2 days. I found the cloth in the corner of the wash basket, folded neat but red as fire." Eleanor blushes but smiles too. "You didn't say anything," she murmurs. Maris nods. "You were quiet. I knew you'd speak when you were ready. I just laid out a second cloth that night, and left the rosemary tea warm." There's a gentle hush in the room. One woman softly wipes her eyes. They begin to share rituals next. "I always wore my red ribbon on the second day. I slept with basil under my pillow. I kept a moonstone in my pocket until the bleeding stopped." Eleanor adds shyly, "I write in my little book each time. Just a line or two." They all nod. "That's how we remember. That's how we teach." That's how we continue. Before the circle ends, Marta opens her pouch and passes around a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, scraps of red thread. Each woman takes one. Eleanor watches, unsure. Maris nudges her gently. She steps forward and accepts a piece. We each carry one, Marta explains. To remind us we've bled, and bled with purpose. We tie it to our shifts, or tuck it in our books, or just keep it near the heart. Eleanor ties hers around her wrist. The thread is soft and frayed, but strong, just like the women around her. As the night grows quiet, the circle slowly breaks. Cups are rinsed, blankets folded, kisses pressed to cheeks, promises to gather again. And when Eleanor steps outside, the stars have gathered overhead. She pulls her shawl tight, the red thread warm against her skin. She does not feel small. She feels woven in, part of a fabric that stretches back generations. A bloodline of laughter, of ache, of tea and cloth and memory. A circle that will never break. The sun rises pale behind a blanket of mist. Light drifts in slowly through the cottage windows, falling across baskets, broom bristles, and the soft folds of linen hung to dry. Eleanor wakes before the hearth fire is stoked, shifting quietly beneath her woolen blanket. She feels the gentle tug low in her belly. The second day has come. The flow is steady now. Not enough to ache, but enough to carry weight. Enough to be felt with each bend, each step, each moment spent outside the stillness of her room. Today, she must go into town. In the Middle Ages, there were no shops with shelves of folded cotton pads. No drawers full of pre-wrapped comforts. No whispering in school halls or plastic packets hidden in sleeves. There was only cloth. Soft strips, often made from worn-out linen shifts or underthings. Cut by hand, folded with care. Washed, wrung, boiled, dried in the shadow of the hearth. These cloths were known by many names. Moon rags, red wraps, bleeding bands. Each girl had her own bundle, passed from her mother, or stitched herself when her moons began. They were folded carefully into underlayers, tied with cords, secured with belts made of leather or braided yarn. Eleanor lays hers across the small table. She folds one fresh cloth into thirds and slips it into place, then winds the cotton band around her waist, tying it with practiced fingers. The whole thing sits quietly under her shift and woolen skirts, out of sight but never out of mind. There is always the chance of a stain. And in the village, stains meant whispers. She remembers when Bruna's niece stained the church pew 2 winters ago. It had bled through the back of her gown, leaving a dark blot on the carved wood. It was only a few inches wide, but it lingered. For weeks afterward, girls walked with careful hands behind their backs. Older women brought small cushions to kneel upon, and the boys laughed in corners. As if the wood had never seen blood before, Bruna muttered. Still, the girls stopped coming to chapel for a month. In the marketplace, Eleanor walks slowly. She keeps her shawl draped lower, the ends trailing behind her like the tail of a cloud. She moves with care, not for shame but out of knowledge. The body's rhythm can shift without warning. And yet, even in public, there are silent signs. The bread seller's apron has a red stitch near the hem. The cooper's wife wears a crimson ribbon at her wrist. The herb vendor gives her a sprig of sweet marjoram without being asked. These are not coincidences. These are codes. Women knew how to look out for one another, without speaking a word. A glance, nod, a hand resting a little longer on the basket's edge. If a stain appeared, it was covered. If cloth was needed, it was lent. If pain struck suddenly, someone guided her home. It was not weakness. It was sisterhood. Eleanor finishes her errands before the sun rises too high. She feels the warmth building again. Low, steady, familiar. The cloth is damp now, but not through. Jazz time. Still, she quickens her pace. By the time she returns to the cottage, her skirts are lifted at the hem, and her cheeks are flushed not from embarrassment, but from relief. Inside, Maris has already placed a pot on the hearth. "You made it," she asks, not turning. Eleanor nods. Yes, just in time. She disappears behind the curtain and changes her cloth in silence. The old one she places in a small basin of warm water beside the bed. A pinch of ash soap. A gentle press. Fold, rinse, wring. There is no rush. This part is ordinary. Like washing one's face. Or braiding hair. A rhythm of care. Stains were common. But in many places they were treated with discretion, not scorn. Cloth was hard to come by. Linen precious. Water not always warm. A woman who bled heavily might have only 2 cloths, each one rinsed again and again before sunrise. They dried them in secret places, behind ovens, on strings in chimneys, beneath beds near the brick heat. No one asked where they went. No one needed to. Some women dyed their cloths red or brown on purpose, to hide the stain, to ease the eye, to carry their bleeding without having to see it. Others embroidered theirs with little flowers, simple blossoms stitched in one corner, as if to say, even this is a thing of beauty. Eleanor doesn't embroider hers, but she does fold them the same way each time, neatly, respectfully, as if returning something sacred to its altar. And perhaps that's exactly what it is. Later she writes in her book, "If I stain the world, let it remember I was here, that I passed through, not hidden, but honest." She closes the book gently and lays a clean cloth across the windowsill to dry. Outside the mist is lifting. The sky turns soft as linen, and the quiet strength of generations wraps around her. Cool, like wind, like the understanding of 100 women who walked through their red days. With quiet courage and clean hands, the days grow longer. The frost recedes, giving way to the early blush of spring. First in the pale green of hawthorn buds, then in the hum of bees returning to the world. Eleanor stands by the window in the morning light, her tea warm in her hands. She watches 2 sparrows peck at the thatch above the shed. A soft breeze stirs her shift. She has not bled in 41 days. She counts them again in her head, again on her fingers, again with a small piece of string tied with careful knots. Still the same number, 41. In the Middle Ages, when the red flow failed to appear, it meant one of 3 things: child, sickness, sign. And each possibility carried its own weight. Sometimes the blood paused without reason, delayed by stress, hunger, grief, or the mysterious rhythms of the moon. Sometimes the absence was joyful, other times it brought fear. Eleanor doesn't know what to feel yet, so she waits. She remembers the first time she learned what the absence might mean. She was 9. Her cousin Aline had grown quiet for weeks. She stopped fetching water. She stayed in the cottage after dusk. Then one morning a baby's cry echoed from behind the curtain, sharp, wet, and undeniable. The women didn't speak of the months before it, only afterward. Whispers about whose eyes the child had, about what name she would take, about how Aileen's belly had never shown as much as they'd expected. She knew, Marta had said simply, because her moon never came. Now Eleanor sits at the foot of her bed, gently pressing her palm to her belly. There is no ache, no signs, only quiet. She drinks mugwort tea in the evenings, eats fennel seeds, warms her abdomen with the red wool cloth Breda gave her. Still nothing. Each time she goes to the wash basin, she expects to see the familiar bloom in her cloth, and each time she does not. Some women turn to midwives in these moments, their eyes wide, their hearts caught between hope and dread. Breda knew how to test. A sprig of mint placed beneath the tongue, a drop of milk mixed with ale and watched overnight. Sometimes just a long look at the skin, the breasts, the eyes. Eleanor hasn't gone to her yet. She isn't ready. The villagers had many beliefs about a missing cycle. Some said if you dreamed of rain for 7 nights without pause, a child was on the way. Others said if your hands turned cold but your belly remained warm, a new life was beginning. Still others believed it could be caused by witchcraft, or a curse, or a fright taken too deeply into the chest. Old Nan once told her, A fox ran across my path one winter and I didn't bleed again for 6 months. Eleanor had laughed at the time. Now she isn't so sure. In her notebook she writes, "No red again today. My dreams are quiet. I feel both full and hollow." She closes the book gently and presses her cheek to her knee. Maris says nothing. She notices, of course, but she does not ask. She brings extra nettle leaves for the tea, lays a clean shift at the end of Eleanor's bed, leaves the window open a little longer in the mornings. Each gesture says, "I know, and I'm here." On the 44th day, Eleanor walks to the riverbank. She dips her hands into the stream, cold and running fast with meltwater. She lifts a stone, smooth and round, and holds it over her womb. Then, in the quiet of her own breath, she speaks aloud for the first time. "If I carry life, I will carry it gently. If I carry silence, I will hold that too." The stone is warm now from her palms. She sets it down and walks back through the trees. In medieval households, a woman might keep her silence about a mist flow for as long as she could, sometimes out of fear, sometimes for safety, sometimes because it was too soon to know. There were no tests, only time. Time to feel the swell, time to dream new dreams, time to prepare or to mourn. That night, as the candles flicker low, Eleanor lays on her side and whispers to the darkness, "Come to me if you are meant to come, or let me be still, and I will listen." The room answers only with the soft hiss of fire. The wool blanket is warm. The house is quiet. The moon, nearly full, casts a glow across the beams. And inside her, something turns quietly. Not forward, not back, just turning, waiting. The morning is damp with dew. Mist hugs the fields like a woolen shawl draped low across the earth. The world seems quieter today. Slower. Even the crows have hushed their cries. Eleanor walks toward Brida's cottage with her shawl drawn close, her breath visible in little white clouds. She has not bled in 46 days. And it is time to ask. Brida's door is open as it always is. Inside, the air smells of crushed herbs and ash soap. Bundles of nettle hang from the beams. A kettle murmurs softly on the fire. Brida does not speak when Eleanor enters. She simply gestures to the wooden stool beside her table. Eleanor sits. Oz. Then she whispers, "It hasn't come." Brida nods slowly. "I thought so," she says, her voice a worn piece of silk. "Let's see what the body wants to say." In the Middle Ages, before anyone could test for life with charts or tubes, midwives relied on signs. Not omens, not magic, but observations, passed down through hundreds of hands. They watched the skin, felt the wrist, looked into the eyes, touched the lower belly, searching for warmth, for fullness, for the rhythm beneath the bones. They listened to dreams, not to judge, but to hear what the blood did not say. Brida begins by taking Eleanor's hands. She holds them palms up, tracing the lines gently with her thumbs. "Your fingers are cool, but the wrists are warm," she murmurs. Next, she touches the skin beneath Eleanor's jaw, just under the ear. No swelling. That's good. Then she kneels, pressing one careful hand just above Eleanor's navel. Soft but not empty. She asks Eleanor questions, not just about her body, but her spirit. Do your dreams reach you clearly? Have you felt pulled toward sour things? Is there more stillness in your bones than usual? Eleanor answers quietly. Yes, she says. Yes to all of it. Brida nods, as if hearing a tune she recognizes. There were many signs a midwife might trust. A sudden fullness in the breasts, a change in the scent of the skin, the darkening of the nipples, a dream of apples, rivers, or red threads, an instinct to walk barefoot, a strange dislike for meat or herbs once loved. These signs weren't written in books. They lived in the body, and in the memory of the women who watched it. Brida takes out a small mirror of polished tin. She holds it up to Eleanor's face, watching the light in her eyes. Then, she sets it down and presses her fingers against the soles of Eleanor's feet. No fever. No dread. No chill between the toes, she murmurs. She sits back thoughtful. Then she asks gently, "Would you like to know what I think?" Eleanor nods, though her heart flutters like a caught moth. Breda says it with the care of someone who has seen sorrow and joy sit side by side. "I think there is life in you. Small yet, but steady." The cottage seems to exhale with her words. Eleanor's eyes mist. She clasps her hands together to still their trembling. She does not feel fear. Not now. She feels seen. Breda does not offer a ceremony. No grand blessing. She simply rises, wraps a strip of wool, and ties it gently around Eleanor's wrist. "This will remind you. Your body is speaking. Listen gently. Walk slowly. Eat what calls to you." She hands Eleanor a pouch of dried raspberry leaf and wild mint. For strength and softness. In other villages, midwives would test the scent of a woman's urine, or mix it with wine to watch how it settled. Some pressed a piece of cloth between her toes for 3 nights and waited to see if she dreamed of children. Each place had its own ways, its own wisdom, but the heart of it was always the same. Watch the body. It will tell you everything. If you learn its language. Eleanor steps outside into the early light. The air feels sharper somehow, clearer. She wraps her shawl around her shoulders and lets the warmth of Breda's hearth cling to her skin a little longer. She does not know what the days ahead will bring. But she knows this. She will not fear her body. Not its bleeding. Not its silence. Not even its new, mysterious blooming. In her notebook that evening she writes, "Breda said there is life. Believe her. But even if she is wrong, my body is not. It is still mine. And I trust it." The candle flickers. The ink dries. And the room fills with the quiet strength of every midwife who ever laid a gentle hand. And listen to the whisper. Beneath the skin. The moon is full tonight. Round and clear as a silver bowl held above the trees. Eleanor lies beneath her blanket, her hands resting on her lower belly. She is not yet certain. Not fully. But her body has gone still in a way it never has before. No flow. No ache. Just a hush. Waiting. The midwives call this phase the mothering moon. The quiet moon that comes when a woman's cycle pauses, and something sacred begins to stir within. In the Middle Ages, a woman's body was watched not with science, but with stories. And the stories said, when the blood stops, the soul prepares a cradle. The moon hides her red threads, and weaves instead with silver. The body becomes a temple, and the womb its altar. No announcement was needed. No trumpet of proof. Only the silence of the flow, and the deepening of the breath. The women of Eleanor's village had their own rituals for this time. Some would light a small lamp on the night of the full moon and place it near the bed. Others would keep a piece of milk bread under the pillow for dreams. A few would stop wearing red, choosing instead the soft colors of cream or moss. The change in clothing was not out of shame, but of transition. The woman who bled each moon had entered a new rhythm. No less sacred, only different. Eleanor wakes with a softness in her chest. She wraps her shawl around her shoulders and steps out into the early light. The village is still asleep, but the sky is pale with morning. She walks slowly to the edge of the woods. There she kneels, hands in the earth, fingers brushing moss. She says nothing aloud, but the breath she takes is full of meaning. If this is the beginning of new life, she wishes it welcome. And if it is only a pause in the bleeding, she honors that too. In many places, a woman who carried no moon blood was seen as being between worlds, no longer in the cycle of release, but not yet swollen with the visible sign of life. It was a hidden season, private one. For some it brought peace, for others fear, but for most it brought awe. Breda had told Eleanor once, "The mothering moon is the time when your dreams sharpen, when your body speaks in symbols, when you begin to hear the stories of the women before you, even if no one tells them out loud." Eleanor begins to dream differently. She dreams of staircases made of wool, of nests built in candlelight, of rivers running not red but gold. She wakes from each dream with her hand on her heart. In the village, older women begin to take notice. Maris no longer gives her tasks in the heavy sun. Bruna brings her a pot of oat porridge without asking. Even Marta, who rarely smiles, pats her hand and says, "You're glowing like beeswax, girl." No one asks directly, but the unspoken understanding is passed gently between glances. Some women chose to keep the news to themselves until the belly rose like dough. Others shared it in hushed circles, over warm cider, over loaves of barley bread. But always the body came first. The truth of the body was the only truth they needed. A mist moon, a new rhythm of hunger, a dream that lingered like perfume, a softness in the feet, a pulse deep beneath the belly that seemed no longer theirs alone. Eleanor writes in her notebook, "My body is a still pond, but I feel something swimming beneath the surface. Not fear, not certainty, only a deep, waiting hush." She places the notebook beside her bed, closes her eyes, and listens to the silence inside her. It is not empty. It is full of possibility. The midwives say that the mothering moon is when the womb whispers, not in pain, not in blood, but in invitation, a quiet turning inward, a wrapping of breath around the center of the self. Eleanor feels it now. Each time she moves with her body, not against it. Each time she eats, she listens more closely to what she needs. Each time she rests, she allows herself to truly rest. That night, she places a candle on her windowsill, not for light, but for honoring. The wax drips slowly as she sleeps. The flame flickers once, then steadies. And outside, the mothering moon rises high and round, casting its silver over the rooftops, the fields, and the quiet, blooming rhythm of a woman between cycles. In the days that follow the mothering moon, the world seems to lean toward Eleanor in quiet recognition. The hens cluck more softly near her. The hearth fire takes quicker with her breath. Even the bread she bakes rises more gently, as if warmed by an invisible hand. Something within her is changing, slowly, deeply, without noise. But around her, the women already know. They do not ask, they simply come. Maris brings fresh milk each morning and leaves it near Eleanor's bedside without comment. Brita stops by in the afternoons to leave dried lemon balm or sweet marjoram by the door. Marta begins knitting something soft and round. She never says for whom, only that her hands need to stay busy. And Eleanor, she listens, not just with her ears, but with her breath, her spine, her bones. She listens like a forest listens to rain. In the Middle Ages, once a woman was believed to be with child, the village shifted around her. Not in loud celebration, but in gentle rearranging. There were no birth announcements, no test, no fanfare, only the quiet forming of a circle. The midwives called it the Moon Mother's season. From the moment the blood ceased and the belly whispered its secret, the woman was wrapped, bit by bit, in the care of others. Not coddled, not weakened, but held, supported by wise women whose hands had already cradled life. They taught without preaching, which roots to avoid, which teas to drink warm, how to listen to the pull in the lower back, when to rest, and when to walk until the ache softened. Brita one day places a bundle of nettles, oats, and chamomile into Eleanor's hands. Steep this when your legs feel heavy. It will help them remember lightness. She brushes Eleanor's hair back with dry, cool fingers. And wear wool at your middle. It keeps the dreams from scattering. Eleanor nods. She doesn't need to understand every word. The care alone is enough. The village elder women begin telling their own stories. Not loudly, not always directly, but in fragments, in baking circles, while sewing in silence or stirring pots. Marta says, "I craved turnips for weeks. Then she came in the spring, full of laughter." Bruna remembers, "He moved only when I sang." I must have hummed myself hoarse by month 6. These were not lectures. They were inheritance, passed from heart to hand to ear. Eleanor sits one evening by the fire while the older women mend linen. Outside, the wind hisses between stones. Inside, the room is golden with candlelight and breath. Maris begins speaking softly. They used to say that when a woman carried life, her voice deepened, that her laugh softened, that she looked like she remembered something ancient, even if she couldn't name it. The others murmur in agreement. Eleanor touches her belly, where still there is no swelling, only warmth. What if I forget what to do, she asks. Breda answers gently. You won't. Your body remembers even what your mind has never learned. In some villages, expectant women were given small tokens by the circle of wives. A string of blue beads for calm, a polished stone to place beneath the bed, a prayer whispered into the weave of a shawl, a lullaby sung not to the child, but to the mother. Eleanor receives no grand gift, only the quiet presence of women who have walked the same moonlit road. And that is enough. Each day she walks a little, not far, just to the edge of the woods and back. Her steps slow, her breath even, her thoughts like leaves floating on water. She does not rush. This is not a race. It is a blooming. And blooms, as the wise women say, cannot be hurried. In her notebook she writes, "The blood has not returned, but in its place I have found something else. Stillness, a widening, a listening." She tucks the page into the fold of her book and closes it with care. That night, as she rests beneath a blanket stitched by hands older than hers, she hears Breda's words once more in her dreams. When a woman carries life, she is not alone. She carries the past with her, and all the mothers before. And beneath that, a whisper, so soft it may have come from her own chest. I am ready. The seasons turn. The barley fields ripple with wind, and the skies deepen into autumn gold. The air smells of earth and apples, of wood smoke and cooling stone. Eleanor stands at the edge of the orchard, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hands cradle her belly, though still it shows no swell. She is waiting, listening. But today, she is not the only one thinking of time. Inside the cottage, Maris folds linen by the hearth, her fingers moving slowly, rhythmically, without thought. The heat no longer flushes her cheeks the way it once did. Her moons have not come in over a year. Her bleeding years are gone. And with them, a quiet chapter has ended. In the Middle Ages, a woman's last moon was rarely marked by celebration. There were no feasts or garlands, no public rite to acknowledge the change. But among women, it was understood. The stopping of the cycle wasn't seen as death, but as transformation. The end of blood meant the beginning of deep wisdom. Maris remembers her last flow. It came in the chill of late winter, thin pale stream, just enough to stain the cloth with a whisper of red. Afterward nothing, only silence, and at first she mourned. She waited for its return like a friend who had traveled far and forgotten to write. She steeped teas. She walked barefoot in moonlight. She whispered to her belly in dreams. But no blood came. And then, slowly, she stopped waiting. Among the village women, the end of bleeding meant stepping into a new name. Crone, wise woman, elder, keeper of the moon's secrets. It was said that when a woman no longer shed blood, her wisdom deepened. Her dreams became clearer. Her sight, both of the heart and the eye, grew sharper. Some believed such women could speak to spirits, or predict storms, or bless a newborn with just a glance. Whether true or not, they were respected, not because of magic, but because they had endured. Maris doesn't call herself a crone, but she does feel different now. Her body no longer turns in tides. She no longer counts the days between cloths, no longer waits for aches to signal a shift, but she remembers the feeling. And it is this remembering that gives her the strength to guide Eleanor now. Eleanor asks her gently one afternoon, while shelling beans by the window, "Was it strange, when it ended?" Maris looks out at the sky before replying. "Strange, yes. Quiet. Like waking to find the river behind your house has dried, but the land is still green. She adds with a small smile. There's a freedom in it too. A lightness. Eleanor nods slowly. Do you miss it? Maris answers without pause. Sometimes, but only because it connected me to other women. Now I watch instead. Remember, I carry their stories, and my own. In the village, women who no longer bled were often the keepers of cycles. They remembered the red days when younger women forgot. They prepared teas, washed cloths, sat beside midwives during births, knew the signs of balance and the signs of danger. They were not less. They were anchors. When a girl bled too soon, they calmed her. When a woman bled too long, they knew what to give. And when the bleeding stopped, they were the first to say, "It is not the end. It is another rhythm. And you belong to it now." Eleanor, still between signs and silence, writes in her notebook, "If the blood comes, I will greet it like an old friend. If it does not, I will listen to what my body tells me next. My cycles do not define me, but they are the language I have learned to speak with care." That evening the fire crackles softly. Maris adds a log, then sits beside Eleanor on the bench. They say little. The house is full of warmth, and dried herbs, and the quiet companionship of two women at different points on the same spiral. One beginning again, one resting at the rim, neither afraid. In the corner of the room, the moon begins to rise. Not blood red, not full, just soft white and watching. The kind of moon that asks nothing, that offers only light. And beneath it, two women breathe in unison. One who waits for the child, one who waits for nothing but carries everything. And between them the threads of a cycle, not broken, pause, not ended, but transformed. The candle burns low. Its flame flickers softly, casting golden halos across the wooden walls, the corners of cloth, the rim of a quiet cup. Eleanor sits with her notebook open, though her pen has been still for many minutes. She is not writing now. She is remembering. Her flow, her pauses, her waiting, the ache in her back, the warmth of Brida's hands, the way Maris spoke of the river, and of endings that were not endings. And she thinks of all the women who have come before her, all the women whose blood marked the earth, and then ceased, and who continued on, wise, strong, changed. In the Middle Ages, a woman's cycle was not just a personal rhythm. It was part of the seasons, part of the household, part of the sacred balance of life and time and death. Each stain was a story, each cloth a chapter, each silence between bleeds, a mystery held like a prayer. No one woman bled alone, even if no one spoke of it, even if shame was sometimes taught, or pain ignored, the blood still came, and still it was shared. Eleanor rises quietly. She moves to the basin by the window, where her last rinsed cloth now dries. She touches its edge, not with disgust, not with embarrassment, but with tenderness. The same tenderness one might give to the memory of childhood, or to the scent of rain on a window long ago. This cloth has carried her, held her, absorbed what needed to be released. She folds it slowly, places it into the wooden chest, and closes the lid without a sound. The cycle will begin again, or it will not. There may be a child, or there may be silence, but what matters most now is this. Eleanor trusts her body. She knows its heat, its tide, its turning. She has walked with it through moonlight and market stalls, through pain and softness, through flow and stillness. And it has never truly betrayed her. It has only ever spoken. She walks outside one last time before bed. The wind is gentle. The stars are clear. Somewhere in the woods, an owl calls. And in that moment, Eleanor realizes she is not just part of a cycle of blood. She is part of a line, a red thread that stretches backward, through her mother, and her mother's mother, and the girl who first stained her shift by the river and thought herself broken, and the woman who whispered spells into boiling water to soothe her daughter's cramps, and the midwife who tied her braid with red string on birthdays and bleeding days. This thread is unbroken. It loops through time like stitches in a quilt, like beads on a string, like the phases of the moon. It is strong, it is hidden, it is eternal, and it will stretch forward to girls not yet born, to women who will one day wonder if they are late, or early, or wrong, or holy, and they too will find cloth, and warmth, and comfort in one another's silence and stories. Back inside, Eleanor climbs into bed. Maris has already drifted off, her breath steady and slow. Eleanor pulls the wool blanket to her chin and lets her hand rest once more on her belly. Not to check, not to question, but to simply thank. She breathes in long and low. She exhales, and she whispers. To her blood, to her body, to the thread itself. I carry you, I remember you. I will pass you on. Outside, the moon begins to wane. The earth spins quietly beneath the stars. And across time, across generations, across stories both whispered and unwritten, the Scarlet Cycle continues, not as shame, not as silence, but as something sacred, something shared, as something endlessly, beautifully ours. The seasons have turned again. Snow lines the thatch rooftops, and the trees stand bare against a milk-white sky. In the hush of winter, the world speaks softly, if it speaks at all. Inside the cottage, Eleanor sits near the hearth, her lap filled with folded cloths. The scent of beeswax and rosemary fills the room, and the fire murmurs its comfort through the silence. The blood has not returned. The child never came. And still, Eleanor is at peace. Time, she's come to learn, is not a straight road. It is a circle, soft spiral, thread. It loops and loops, from red to white, from full to empty, from waiting to release. Some cycles are loud, some are hidden, but all are sacred. Eleanor has become what Brita once was. Not a midwife, not yet, but a listener, keeper of warmth, a woman to whom others now come. Young girls with flushed cheeks, older women with unsure eyes. They knock quietly, they speak softly, and they look to her not for answers, but for remembrance, 'cause she remembers. One evening, a girl named Anwen arrives at her door. She is barely 13, her shift stained, her face pale. I think I've broken something, she whispers. Eleanor smiles gently. She reaches for the pot of warm cloths beside the fire. No, love, she murmurs. You've just begun something very old. She helps her wash. She sits with her while the cramps come. She gives her broth and silence, and a woolen wrap for her middle. And then she places a tiny red thread around the girl's wrist. You are part of the cycle now, she says. You are never alone in it. Eleanor's own story is not finished. There may still be blood. There may still be life. But she no longer waits for it like a signal. She walks with it now, side by side. A quiet companion who sometimes arrives and sometimes simply hums in the background. She is not afraid of its coming, and not saddened by its pause. She has become the keeper. In the village, they begin to call her the quiet one who understands. Not because she speaks often, but because she does not need to. Women find their way to her door. They come in silence and leave lighter. She never gives advice, only tea, warmth, stories. Sometimes she will place her hand gently on their belly, as Brita once did, and the touch says more than words ever could. One night, under a sky soft with snow, she dreams of all the women she has known. She sees Marta wrapping bread in cloth, Maris by the fire, folding linen, Brita kneeling in her herb garden, girls laughing, crying, bleeding, growing. She sees a red thread running through them all, from wrist to wrist, from heart to heart, and then she sees her own hands, not empty, but full. She is holding the thread now, and she is ready to pass it on. Eleanor wakes and lights a single candle. She writes one final page in her book. My blood has taught me patience. My silence has taught me trust. My waiting has taught me how to hold others. I am the keeper now. Of cloth. Of memory. Of rhythm. The cycle lives in me still. Even if it never returns. I am not less. Nor more. I am the thread. Outside, the morning snow glows with quiet light. And inside, the keeper of the cycle sits in stillness. Her story complete for now. But never truly ended. Because the scarlet thread continues. Through time. Through generations. Through pain, rest, and renewal. And always, always. In the gentle hands. Of women. Who remember.